Propriety floats listless on the tide, brined in noxious degradation. Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Loki Oren, and today we're talking about Darkest Dungeon 2, not playing it. As you can see from the title and what we're looking at, the next patch, the next update to Darkest Dungeon 2 has been formally announced and released. By the time this video goes out, the patch should already be out on the experimental branch. But we'll be playing Shroud of the Deep. So the patch is slated to go out, at least last I've heard, at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on May 18th. So I'm recording this on the 17th when the patch notes were released. So hopefully by the time this video is going out, this should already be available. But, you know, YouTube is what it is. End of the day, May 18th, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time should be the release time. It will be releasing initially on the experimental branch. Makes sense. They want to make sure there's no critical issues prior to pushing it to live. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to kind of run through the patch notes at kind of a high level, and we'll just sort of go through each of them, and hopefully by the end of it we'll have a pretty good picture of what's happening. But I'm not going to necessarily read everything because I'll include a link to where the patch notes are, and I'd encourage you to read them all for yourself if you're interested. So for the first big change, and one that I think a lot of folks are very excited about, is the Shroud. As the name implies, the Shroud of the Deep. This is a new region. So like the Sprawl, the Foder, the Sluice, and the Tangle, we now have the Shroud. It sounds pretty sweet. It's going to be this kind of rotted boardwalk, salt-soaked planks and jetties connecting the waterlogged homes of fisherfolk. They're worshipping the sea, and their regions have been devastated by, worshipping elder gods of the ocean. We're getting kind of the usual suspects you'd expect in a new region. 7 new monsters, from the gestating cabin boy to the imposing doctor. That is not a adjective I'd like to see used there, but I mean that sounds pretty eldritch horror-y. An imposing docker sounds like we getting another big boy. New lair boss and new lair boss trophies, new region-specific trinkets, and new music and narration. Both very exciting because we're just going to get more of the story and perhaps a better picture of the story that Red Hook is trying to tell. And that ties in very nicely to the next piece, which is we're also getting Act 2, or they're calling it the Next Confession. Resentment. Redemption demands an acknowledgement of failures past. Sign your confession anew and face the personification of your second sin. So we were getting Act 2, the Next Confession, which is resentment. Now this is interesting because the community as a whole, I think the general prevailing theory was that they were doing the 5 stages of grief. The first being denial, the second being anger. Now, resentment and anger, there's a bit of an overlap. I can kind of see it. So maybe it's not totally dead yet, but resentment is not anger. It's, a different emotion. So they might be going in a different direction than the stages of grief that we thought, which is very interesting, and I look forward to finding out what it is. But what does this confession means? New story narration, so we get to learn more. New intros, repeatable lines and outros. New art. They've reformatted some of the denial narration to better match what we're doing, and added, again, new narration and artwork. So this is quite interesting. I'm quite excited. I think I'm going to be updating my project run description now, and saying that it's either the Chains of Denial or whatever the boss of Resentment is. The goal is to beat, quote, the game with each named formation. That's always been the goal. So we'll start taking formations into the new content, and depending on, how it feels, maybe we'll do some denial, some resentment, just kind of how we're feeling. The next big change, and I really like this one, is Ordained Monsters. So the enemies you fight will have a chance to spawn as Ordained, which just means they get extra power, extra health, extra damage, extra speed, extra, basically they're just better versions of themselves. Now, this really addresses the idea of scaling. So, early on, every fight is kind of dangerous, and by the end of it, there are certain fights that just aren't dangerous at all. A good example is, I think everyone who's played Darkest Dungeon 2 has had at some point seen like 4 lost souls in the final region before the mountain. And that is just not a scary fight. I mean, you're one-shotting these things. They are not dangerous to you anymore. And this works to correct that by ramping the power as you go. So while it may still be 4 lost souls and that's not that dangerous of a fight, they're at least going to have the health and damage and stats to be at least somewhat threatening. So the way this works is in your first region, there is a 10% chance of any monster spawning being ordained. In the second region, 40%, and then the third region, 80%. Lair bosses and corpses are never ordained. So, interestingly, they kind of hid this. Not really hid it, but they put it, they didn't put it as its own bullet. All monsters have had their base HP and damage reduced by 20%, meaning that the ordained is going to be bumping it up back to that and then above it, I assume. But the idea is that your first region is going to be a lot easier, or I say a lot, it's going to be easier, and your third region is going to be much more difficult. And that should give a more kind of consistent power curve, which I think is a good change for the game. It means that you're less likely to get stomped on in your first zone, and may make going to a zone 1 lair boss a little bit more viable if you're not going to get just obliterated by resistance encounters along the way. And by the third full region, you again are still struggling, even though you might have S tier and A tier trinkets and all your mastery points and everything set up. The game can still win. So we should hopefully see a reduction in the snowballs, but remains to be seen. We do have to test it. Next up, food redesign. And this is an interesting one. I saw this suggested in the Discord, which I'm going to talk about more in a few minutes, but the function of food is completely redesigned. Instead of being something you use to heal, which almost nobody needed to do because you would heal so much, now the food is purely a buff. So, every inn now heals you to 100%. So you always start a zone at 100% health. And food is instead used to boost max HP and other stats. So kind of like Steak and Spuds was, heal for some amount and get debuff resistance. Now all the foods will do that. They do call out that the base hero HP has been lowered by 10% to adjust for food being used to buff HP. The worst food item, so slime mold, increases HP by 10%. So our effective base HPs have been lowered 10%, then immediately raised with the baseline food buff. I think this is a pretty good change. They do call out that you'll always be able to eat the Pogger's Pig, because the Pogger's Pig's amazing. But I think this is a great change because it makes food a little bit more valuable. I think in all of my runs recently, I've been discarding like every type of food but Steak and Spuds almost automatically. And even Steak and Spuds was getting kicked to the curb a fair amount of the time because it just didn't move the needle. I didn't need the health. And, the debuff resistance is nice, but, sometimes I want to carry another trinket or something. So, food redesign, buffing max HP, and providing other buffs. It remains to be seen what those buffs are, but we'll find out together. Next up, some quality of life changes to driving. In particular, the stagecoach now moves faster once there is no more obstacles or choices to make. So, if you imagine, you go up to a fork in the road, you pick the left path, and it is not a road battle path, it's a safe path. Then your stagecoach will go materially faster to the next node. Definitely a way to increase the speed of a run without doing anything kind of weird. I think it's trimming some of the fat of the experience, which is a great idea. I will say that, excuse me, I'm not sure how much faster they're going to be able to make the game beyond that. Like, the game takes as long as it takes. Like, maybe they can cut down on act outs would be the other big one, or the various, what is it? I'm forgetting the name, virtues, and, the other name's escaping me. It'll come to me. But the relationship act outs is the other option. Either way, definitely nice to get some increased speed. It'll make my videos a little bit shorter and cut out some of that travel time. Visual improvements and adjusted the road object loot table. So we're going to get slightly more loot from road objects, but more relics than anything else. So basically a little bit more money. That's not bad. And something with the Infernal Torch that I don't really fool with, but basically you can't move it between stagecoach slots, which I'm surprised that was an issue before. No, interesting. Next up, resistance and insistence encounters both have some minor changes. Resistance encounters just have some additional changes and improved options for engage and avoid choices when you have less than 4 heroes. So I know that the community has already started in on the 2-character and even single-character challenge runs. I know for certain that I've heard of and seen evidence of 2-character challenge runs beating the Chains of Denial. So this is kind of a buff to that, but I think it's really intended to be a buff for parties where you lose somebody, which is not really relevant to my project runs, because if I lose a character, then the run's over. But it is, it is an interesting and good improvement, and then some small visual errors. The assistance encounters, though, I think this is a very good change. So we're going to start seeing different kinds of assistance encounters with more obvious variants. So the standard encounter gives flame. The combat encounter gives combat-related supplies, and provisions gives in items, presumably food and other non-combat items. So we don't know how this is going to be depicted in game, but it should be fairly obvious, that you may get the opportunity to choose. Do I need flame? Do I need like combat items? Do I need food and in items? I think that's a pretty great change, just to give a little bit more flexibility. And of course, there's still going to be the RNG of they're only offering me combat items, and I need in items, or I need flame. But remains to be seen how good that is. But I definitely think it's worth having. And this is I mentioned earlier that some of this is stuff I've seen in the community, and I really like this. So I really want to thank and call out Red Hook here for doing something I think is really good. Putting in this community tag to pointedly call out things the community brought up and that they listened to. Robbery variant assistance encounters de-emphasize food in exchange for more supplies and in items. So when we rob them, we're not just stealing their food. We're stealing the stuff on them that's actually worth something. That's definitely a good change. Granted, now with this food redesign change, it might be that stealing food is better, but maybe it's a balancing thing. And then some minor errors and whatnot. Academic study encounters, new options for stress heroes, low relic, low inventory interact options for greedy heroes, fix some issues with the Shambler's altar, other graphical improvements, and fixed party torch misapplication as rewards for caged creature and thing in the corner variants. So really just kind of cleaning up and providing some new options. There's not much, I can't really say much more about it because we have to go do that. Then this is where the community really shines. A bunch of UI changes, all of them suggested by the community. Spacebar to enter nodes, showing equipped skills on mastery, disease indicator on driving portraits, a skill upgrade alt view now available on the character sheet. That's great. Definitely like that. And a hero story. Some of these I did want to call a hero story recap at the crossroads. So you can actually go back and look at the lore of your heroes and what you know about them. Cinematics section, so we can rewatch those cinematics, and an autosave indicator, so when we know when the game is autosaved, and added random party buttons, so you can literally just hit a button and get a random 4 characters. Not really useful to my project runs, but I can see how random runs are going to be a thing for people. That's definitely going to be a fun addition to the community. More UI items, a lot of them just helping clarify or correcting errors. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read through them all. But let's go down to heroes here. A couple of cleanups. We already talked about hero base HP being reduced. But they're also fixing quirks like Thanatophobia applying when a hero corpse dies. You know, once your Hellion dies and your characters are all traumatized, her corpse getting blown up is not as relevant. And fix an issue where you could get stressed when a corpse gets crit. These are both just nice quality of life changes, because that's really punishing for something that you can't do much about. Denial of reason was blocking bloodlust. That's kind of funny. And then monsters, we already talked about this. They reduce the base health to health, damage, and speed to account for ordainment. Quirk and trinket effects are no longer applicable when striking or killing an enemy corpse. Champions now have a low chance of spawning in Guardian fights, and champions now have a low chance of spawning in Lair fights. So this might be a terminology thing. I'm not 100% on this, but I'm pretty sure that means like her ladyship, Bullseye Barrett, and Black Phillip, the like named NPCs. I think they're the ones that's referring to. They can now show up in Guardian and Lair fights, which is fine. I don't think that really doesn't strike me one way or the other. That's sort of just nice to know. And adjusted the disease pool, so different diseases for monster skills. Creature Den, we've got a new disease, Tarantism, which I don't actually know that one. What is Tarantism? Is it fear of spiders? Oh, a psychological illness characterized by an extreme impulse to dance, and was believed to be caused by the bite of a tarantula. Well, that's pretty funny. So now your characters are just gonna, want to dance and dance the night away. Well, there you go. Let's see. Most of the rest of these are just little changes, not really super, big deal. Shambler community suggested and they agreed improved rewards and are now guaranteed. So you're guaranteed to get paid if you have to kill the Shambler. Rather than before where you could get shafted. And yeah, I mean, at this point, as I'm kind of scrolling through here, I do want to call out again, this is a big patch. There was a lot of changes, and I don't think it's realistic for me to go over every line. So, I don't want to make this video that long. But I would encourage everyone, I'll put the link in the description to check out the patch notes if you haven't already. Read through and just get familiar. But most of the combat changes, combo tokens now last for an additional round, so you actually get to use your combo tokens, though it does affect monsters as well. The permanent version of Immobilize, calling out like the Dreaming General who can't move and the Taproot who cannot move, they now have a different colored Immobilize token to signify that you can't get rid of it. Fixed issues where start of round skills were getting unintentionally triggered in certain circumstances. And let's see, guard tokens are removed when the guarding aperture is captured. What does captured mean? That's a little concerning. So apparently somebody in the Shroud is going to be throwing a net or something and capturing our characters so that they can't guard people. Changed crit pop text to now read critical. That's nice. Changes to the various quirks here. Sunny Disposition and Curmudgeon quirks now affect affinity ticks for the party. New heavy-handed quirk is a 5% chance to just move somebody. Punch Drunk Stun can no longer trigger off dot damage, which is nice, though, I mean, if you have Punch Drunk, you want to get rid of it as soon as possible. Cowardice, now you take 1 stress damage, 5% chance when hit, and move back when you can, 15% chance. So that's good to know what Cowardice actually does. Pyromaniac and Field Surgeon now have token-driven bonus skills for Firebomb and Healing Salve. Interesting. So these are quirks that now affect combat items. That's kind of cool. Fairies, Fish Folks, and Shroud-related quirks have been added, which makes sense. The Runs is now a disease, not a quirk. That's nice, because it was really sucked to get it as a quirk. Disarmor quirk, 10% chance to give weakness to an enemy to an enemy that hit the hero. Pretty sweet. Tarantism. Okay, so we do find out what Tarantism does. It's chance for a forced move, now exclusive to spiders. So your characters are dancing between spaces if they're if they get Tarantism. Algal Bloom Disease added, chance of proccing Barnacle or small damage return, exclusive to the Leviathan boss. So now we know what the Shroud's lair boss is. It's the Leviathan. So that could be a whale, could be a squid thing. Either way, that's I mean, that's a biblical reference, but that'll be interesting. Slugger now does stuns instead of damage. That's kind of sad. Let's go through the rest here. Okay, interesting. So Sneaker Standard and Covert Cloak, this will definitely require, looking back at my tier list, change from turn start to round start. So your characters that need to stealth will enter stealth at the beginning of the combat round rather than the start of their turn, which means that they will be in stealth on their turn, potentially, and thus can do something. Faceless Visage has been improved. Annotated textbook and early experiment names properly assigned. So this is something I corrected on my own in the tier list video, but apparently they weren't set up. New Stagecoach upgrade Almanac, the Shroud. So this is Almanac, if I remember right, is chance to scout. So this presumably is high chance to scout the Shroud. Let's see, miscellaneous gameplay, Heatwave, Hail, Frenzy, just, you know, minor changes to how they work. Frenzied is a little weaker. Hail's a little bit less impactful. Heat Wave for reduced burn resistance makes sense. T-Service now properly reduces negative banter instead of increasing it. What? I didn't know that was broken. Okay, well that's good to know. Well, yeah, so T-Service is actually doing what it wants to now. Battle configurations were adjusted to use multiple conditions for ravages. E.g., the Shambler has an increased chance of spawning when torch is low and the region is closer to the mountain. Okay. Also adjusted all region number conditions for full-length region instead of raw region counts, so the sluice doesn't mess up power scaling. So the sluice is a free zone still and doesn't muck with your chances to see a Shambler early. Added new region goals for Visit Oasis and Visit Creature Den. Makes sense. Retune of Triage Kit and Healing Salve. Stacking limits reduced. Prices increased. Increased heal value for Triage Kit. Wow, Triage Kit was already a 50% heal. It's hard to believe it's going to be more than that. But, okay, you can carry fewer of them, and they cost more, but Triage Kit heals for more. That's still, I mean, those are still really good items. New hero barks, like that. Tune down all frequency act out frequency sums. That's a really clunky sentence, but I think the intent is that we're going to see less act outs overall. Revised block partner from moving relationship act out to only block moves where the partner themselves is moving. Now won't block situations where the partner tries to move someone else. Interesting. Again, kind of an edge case, but that's good to know. We will be revising relationships significantly in a future update. So, you know, this is all kind of, you know, they're talking about this like it's temporary. Then a bunch of bug fixes. Let's see. Nothing that really sticks out to me. Just, you know, different little bug fixes. But yeah, that takes us to the end of the list here. So overall, I'm very excited for this patch. In case you couldn't tell, this is definitely the start of the game proper. It feels like we're moving forward in early access. Red Hook is sort of keeping to the roadmap they laid out. They do call out, note, the narrative sequence design was extra work added to this milestone, just as hero paths were packed into M1 despite not being on the roadmap. However, this means that the permanent hero upgrades has been pushed to a subsequent milestone, so it's going to take longer to get that. But I appreciate, you know, first of all, that they're calling out changes they're making from the community, but also that they are calling out like, hey, we know this is something we promised and it's coming, it's just not coming yet. So definitely appreciate that. Overall, very excited. Love to hear your comments down below. Let me know what you think. What did you see? Did I miss something? And yeah, looking forward to seeing you in the Shroud. Until then, see ya.